Beneath the Mask. Chapter 1. Rebirth. The rain came down in sheets, hammering the cracked asphalt of the alley like 1,000 tiny fists. Alex Rourke stood under the flickering neon of a dive bar sign, the word paradise buzzing intermittently, as if it couldn't decide whether to live or die. Fitting, he thought. His own life was about to flicker out, at least on paper. He adjusted the hood of his jacket, the damp fabric clinging to his shoulders. The burner phone in his pocket vibrated once, twice, then went silent. That was the signal. He glanced at his watch. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until the world believed Alex Rourke, detective first grade, was dead. He stepped into the alley, boots splashing through oily puddles. The air smelled of wet concrete and rotting garbage, a scent that clung to this part of Chicago like a second skin. At the far end, a black SUV idled, its exhaust curling into the night like a ghost. Alex's pulse quickened, but his face remained a mask, calm, unreadable. He'd spent years perfecting that look. It had kept him alive through raids, interrogations, and the kind of nights that left scars you couldn't see. The SUV's driver's side window rolled down, revealing a man with a shaved head and a scar that zigzagged from his temple to his jaw. "You Rourke?" the man asked, his voice low, accented. "Eastern European, maybe Russian." Alex couldn't place it exactly, but it carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much and cared too little. "Yeah," Alex said, keeping his tone flat. "You Petrov?" The man nodded barely. "Get in." Alex slid into the passenger seat, the leather creaking under his weight. The interior smelled of cigarette smoke and something sharper, like gun oil. Petrov didn't look at him, just pulled the SUV onto the street, the wipers slapping rhythmically against the rain. Alex's hand rested near his waist, where a Glock would have been if he hadn't turned it in 3 days ago. Old habits. "Papers," Petrov said, not taking his eyes off the road. Alex reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, damp from the rain. Inside was a new identity. Marcus Kane, ex-con, fresh off a 5-year bid for armed robbery. The kind of guy who'd fit right into the underbelly of Vorya, the international trafficking ring he was tasked with infiltrating. He handed the envelope over, and Petrov tucked it into his coat without looking. "You're late," Petrov said. "Traffic," Alex replied, deadpan. Petrov snorted, a sound that might have been a laugh or a warning. "You got a mouth. That's good. They like that, but not too much." They drove in silence through Chicago's South Side, past boarded-up storefronts and flickering streetlights. Alex's mind churned. 90 days. That's what Captain Dana Mullins had given him. 90 days to burrow into Vorya's heart, map their routes, identify their players, and bring the whole operation crashing down. 90 days before the brass pulled the plug, or before Alex ended up in a shallow grave. He'd done undercover work before, but nothing like this. Vorya wasn't just a gang, it was a machine, sprawling across continents, moving people like cargo. Women, children, sometimes men, sold to the highest bidder in places most cops wouldn't dare set foot. Alex had seen the case files, grainy photos of cargo holds packed with bodies, ledger books with numbers that made his stomach turn. The kind of evil that didn't just break laws, it broke souls. "You nervous?" Petrov asked, breaking the silence. Alex turned his head slightly, studying the man's profile. "Should I be?" Petrov's lips twitched. "Everyone's nervous their first time." Alex didn't respond. He wasn't nervous, not exactly. He'd learned to bury fear a long time ago, back when he was a kid watching his father's fists turn his mother's face into a roadmap of bruises. Fear was a luxury he couldn't afford, but there was something else. A tightness in his chest, a sense that this job was different. Not just the stakes, but the way Mullins had looked at him during the briefing. Her eyes had been too sharp, too calculating, like she was measuring him for a coffin. The SUV pulled into an abandoned warehouse district, the kind of place where screams didn't carry far. Petrov killed the engine and nodded toward a rusted metal door. "Inside. Don't keep them waiting." Alex stepped out, the rain soaking through his jacket now. He crossed the lot, his boots crunching on gravel, and pushed the door open. The warehouse was cavernous, lit by a few dangling bulbs that cast long shadows across the concrete floor. 5 men waited inside, their faces half hidden in the dim light. One stood out immediately, broad-shouldered, mid-40s, with a shaved head and eyes like a shark's. He wore a tailored suit that looked out of place in the grime, and a gold chain glinted at his throat. "Marcus Kane," the man said, his voice smooth but heavy with an accent. "Russian, definitely. You're late." "Traffic," Alex said again, meeting the man's gaze. The others chuckled, but the man in the suit didn't. He stepped closer, close enough that Alex could smell his cologne. Something expensive, sharp. "I'm Victor. You answer to me now. Understand?" Alex nodded once, keeping his posture relaxed but ready. Victor's eyes flicked over him, sizing him up like a butcher eyeing a slab of meat. "Petrov says you're good. Says you've got a record, but you're not stupid. That true?" "I get by," Alex said. Victor's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "We'll see. You want in, you prove it. Tonight." Alex's stomach tightened, but he kept his face blank. "What's the job?" Victor gestured to one of the men, who tossed a duffel bag at Alex's feet. It landed with a heavy thud. "Open it," Victor said. Alex crouched, unzipped the bag. Inside were stacks of cash bundled tight and a Beretta with a suppressor. His pulse kicked up a notch, but he didn't let it show. He stood, meeting Victor's gaze again. "What's the play?" "There's a guy," Victor said. "Owes us money, thinks he can run. You find him, you bring him here. Alive, preferably. But if he fights..." He shrugged, letting the implication hang. Alex nodded, his mind racing. This was the first test, and it was a classic. Blood in, blood out. He'd expected something like this, but not so soon. He hefted the bag over his shoulder. "Where is he?" Victor handed him a slip of paper with an address. A motel in Englewood, one of Chicago's roughest neighborhoods. "You've got 2 hours, don't fuck it up." The motel was a squat 2-story building with peeling paint and a sign that flickered vacancy like a dying heartbeat. Alex parked the SUV a block away, the Beretta tucked into his waistband. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air was thick with humidity, clinging to his skin like a second layer of doubt. He'd done this before, played the part, walked the line, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the weight of the mission, the knowledge that one wrong move could end it all. Or maybe it was the way Victor had looked at him, like he already knew something Alex didn't. The target's room was on the 2nd floor, number 214. Alex climbed the exterior stairs, his boots quiet on the rusted metal. He knocked twice, sharp, and waited. No answer. He knocked again, then tried the handle. Locked. He glanced around, nobody in sight, and pulled a lockpick from his jacket. 10 seconds later, the door clicked open. The room was a mess, clothes strewn across the bed, empty beer cans on the nightstand, a faint smell of weed lingering in the air, but no target. Alex's gut told him the guy was close, maybe hiding. He moved silently, checking the bathroom, empty, then the closet. That's where he found him, a scrawny guy in his 30s, crouched behind a pile of dirty laundry, eyes wide with panic. "Don't," the guy whispered, holding up his hands. "Please, man, I can pay." "Up," Alex said, his voice low, authoritative. He didn't draw the Beretta, not yet. "You're coming with me." "I don't have the money," the guy stammered. "I swear I was gonna get it." Alex grabbed him by the collar, hauling him to his feet. "Move!" The guy stumbled forward, still babbling about money, about how he'd make it right. Alex didn't listen. He was too busy scanning the room, the hall, the parking lot below. Something felt off, like the air was too still. He pushed the guy toward the stairs, one hand on his shoulder, the other hovering near his gun. That's when he heard it, a faint click, like a door closing softly. Alex spun, shoving the guy behind him, and drew the Beretta in one fluid motion. A shadow moved at the far end of the balcony, too quick to identify. Alex's heart pounded, but he kept his aim steady. "Show yourself," he called, his voice cutting through the drizzle. No answer. The shadow was gone. Maybe it was nothing, a stray cat, a junkie looking for a fix. But Alex's instinct screamed otherwise. He lowered the gun, grabbed the guy's arm, and hustled him down the stairs to the SUV. Back at the warehouse, Victor was waiting, his shark eyes glinting under the bulbs. The target was on his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back, still begging. Alex stood to the side, the duffel bag at his feet, his face a mask of indifference. "You did good, Kane," Victor said, circling the target like a predator. "Quick, clean, no mess." Alex nodded, saying nothing. The guy on the floor was sobbing now, his words incoherent. Alex's stomach churned, but he kept it locked down. This was the job. This was the line he had to walk. Victor crouched in front of the guy, grabbing his chin. "You thought you could steal from us? From Vorya?" "I'm sorry," the guy choked out. "I'll pay, I swear." Victor stood, pulling a knife from his belt. The blade caught the light, sharp and cold. "You don't pay with money," he said. "You pay with blood." Alex's hand twitched, but he didn't move. He couldn't. Not yet. Not on the first night. Victor glanced at him, that not-quite smile back on his face. "You're in, Kane. For now." He nodded to one of the other men, who dragged the target toward a door at the back of the warehouse. The guy's screams echoed, then cut off abruptly as the door slammed shut. Alex forced himself to breathe, slow and steady. 90 days. He just had to survive 90 days. Victor clapped a hand on his shoulder, the gesture almost friendly. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow you meet the real players." Alex nodded, his jaw tight. As he walked back to the SUV, the rain started again. Heavier now, washing away the blood that wasn't there. But he felt it anyway, sticky and warm, clinging to his hands. In his pocket, the burner phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Good start. Don't trust anyone." No signature, but he knew who it was. Captain Mullins watching from the shadows. Alex deleted the message and drove into the night, the weight of his new name, Marcus Kane, settling over him like a shroud. Chapter 2. Crossing the Line. The warehouse smelled of rust and diesel, a cavernous tomb lit by flickering fluorescence that buzzed like dying insects. Alex Rourke, Marcus Kane now, stood in the center of the concrete floor, his boots planted firm, his face a mask of steel. The duffel bag from last night was gone, replaced by a single folding chair where Victor sat, legs crossed, a cigarette dangling from his lips. 4 other men flanked him, their eyes cold and unblinking, like wolves sizing up prey. Alex felt the weight of their stares, but he didn't flinch. He'd been through worse, or so he told himself. "Marcus," Victor said, exhaling a plume of smoke, "you did good last night. Quick, no hesitation. But that was just the warm-up." Alex nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "What's next?" Victor's lips curled into that familiar, not-quite smile, the kind that promised pain. "Next, you prove you're one of us. Not just a hired gun, not just a street rat with a rap sheet. Vorya doesn't take strays. You want in? You earn it." Alex's pulse ticked up, but he kept it buried. He'd known this was coming. Every syndicate had its rituals, its blood rites. Vorya, with its global reach and body count, would be no different. "Name it," he said, his voice low, steady. Victor flicked his cigarette to the floor, crushing it under his heel. 3 tests: loyalty, strength, nerve. Pass, and you're in. Fail. He shrugged, letting the threat hang in the stale air. "Let's just say failure's not an option." One of the men stepped forward, a brick of a guy with a shaved head and knuckles scarred like old leather. He tossed a rusted crowbar at Alex's feet. It clattered against the concrete, the sound echoing in the empty space. "First test," Victor said. "Loyalty." Alex bent to pick up the crowbar, its weight cold and heavy in his hand. He straightened, meeting Victor's gaze. "Who's the target?" Victor gestured to a door at the far end of the warehouse. It creaked open, and 2 men dragged in a third, bound, gagged, his face swollen and bruised. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, staining the cloth stuffed in his mouth. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with the desperate look of someone who knew he was already dead. "This is Yuri," Victor said, his tone casual, like he was introducing a coworker. Yuri thought he could talk to the feds, thought he could sell us out and walk away. He was wrong. Alex's stomach twisted, but he kept his face blank. He'd seen this play before. Cartels, gangs, mafias. They all loved their loyalty tests. Beat a man, break a man, kill a man. Prove you're one of them. His mind raced, calculating. Refuse, and he'd blow his cover. Play along, and he'd cross a line he'd sworn never to cross again. 90 days, he reminded himself. Just 90 days. Do it, Victor said, his voice hardening. Or we do you. Alex tightened his grip on the crowbar, his knuckles whitening. Yuri's eyes locked onto his, wide and pleading, muffled whimpers escaping the gag. Alex stepped forward, his boots echoing in the silence. He raised the crowbar, his arms steady, but inside his mind screamed. He could feel the weight of the mission, the eyes of the men around him, the invisible tether to Captain Mullins pulling taut. One swing, that's all it would take. One swing to sell the lie, to keep Marcus Kane alive. He hesitated just for a fraction of a second, and Victor's eyes narrowed. Problem, Kane? Victor asked, his voice ablade. Alex swung. The crowbar connected with Yuri's shoulder, a dull crack that sent the man sprawling to the floor. Yuri screamed through the gag, curling into a ball. Alex stood over him, chest heaving, the crowbar still in his hand. He hadn't gone for the head, not yet. Maybe he could stop this, find another way. Again, Victor said. Alex's jaw clenched. He swung again, this time to Yuri's ribs. Another crack, another scream. The men around him nodded, their faces unreadable. Alex's heart pounded, but he kept his mask in place. He'd done worse in the past, hadn't he? Back when he was a rookie, before he learned to compartmentalize, to bury the guilt where it couldn't touch him. Victor raised a hand, stopping him. Enough. He's still useful. He nodded to the men, who dragged Yuri back through the door, his sobs fading into the shadows. Victor stood, dusting off his suit. Not bad, Kane. You've got the stomach for it. Let's see if you've got the rest. The second test came an hour later in a different warehouse. This one smaller, hotter, the air thick with the smell of sweat and blood. Strength, Victor had called it, but it wasn't about lifting weights or running laps. It was a fight. Bare knuckle, no rules, against a guy twice Alex's size. The man's name was Dima, a hulking Russian with a shaved head and a grin that showed too many teeth. He cracked his knuckles as Alex stepped into the makeshift ring, a circle of crates and barrels lit by a single overhead bulb. No weapons, Victor said, leaning against a crate, lighting another cigarette. No tapping out. You stop when he's down. Alex sized up Dima, his mind cataloging weaknesses. The slight limp in the man's left leg, the way his shoulders hunched like he was protecting an old injury. Alex wasn't small, 6 feet, lean muscle, built for speed more than bulk, but Dima was a tank. One wrong move, and he'd be eating concrete. Dima charged, fists swinging like sledgehammers. Alex ducked, sidestepped, and landed a quick jab to Dima's ribs. The big man grunted but didn't slow. He swung again, catching Alex's shoulder with a glancing blow that sent a jolt of pain down his arm. Alex gritted his teeth, dancing back, keeping his distance. He couldn't out-muscle Dima, but he could outlast him. The fight dragged on, a brutal dance of fists and blood. Alex took hits, his lips split, his ribs screaming, but he gave as good as he got, targeting Dima's weak spots with surgical precision. A knee to the bad leg, a hook to the jaw, a low blow when the ref wasn't looking. Dirty, but effective. Finally, Dima went down, his massive frame crashing to the floor, chest heaving. Alex stood over him, panting, blood dripping from his knuckles. The men around the ring were silent, their eyes unreadable. Victor clapped slowly, the sound sharp in the stillness. Good, he said. You fight like a man with nothing to lose. I like that. Alex wiped the blood from his lip, saying nothing. He felt the weight of the room, the eyes on him, the unspoken question. Who are you, Marcus Kane? He wondered how long he could keep the answer buried. The third test was the worst. Nerve, Victor called it. They drove Alex to a mansion on the outskirts of Chicago, a sprawling estate hidden behind high walls and security cameras. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of cigar smoke and expensive perfume. Men in suits mingled with women in dresses that cost more than Alex's old salary, their laughter sharp and hollow. But beneath the glitz, There was something rotten. Alex felt it in his bones. Victor led him to a basement, down a staircase that seemed to descend into hell itself. The room was dimly lit, lined with private booths where men sat, their faces hidden in shadow. At the center was a raised platform, like a stage, and on it stood a dozen women, their hands bound, their eyes downcast. Some were barely more than girls. Alex's stomach churned, but he kept his face blank, his hands loose at his sides. "This is our business," Victor said, his voice low, almost reverent. "This is what keeps the world turning. Supply and demand, Kane. You understand?" Alex nodded, his throat tight. He understood too well. He'd seen the case files, the photos, the numbers, but seeing it in person, the fear in the women's eyes, the casual cruelty of the men bidding like they were buying cars, it hit him like a fist to the gut. "Your test," Victor said, handing him a tablet. "Place a bid. Anyone you want. Show us you're not soft." Alex took the tablet, his fingers steady despite the rage burning in his chest. The screen displayed profiles, names, ages, nationalities, all reduced to commodities. He scrolled, his mind racing. He couldn't refuse, not without blowing his cover. But he couldn't do this either, not this. That's when he saw her, Isabel Vega. She stepped out of the shadows, her presence like a blade cutting through the room. She was tall, sharp-featured, with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes that seemed to see through him. Her black dress hugged her frame, but it was the way she moved, confident, predatory, that made the men in the room sit up straighter. "You're the new guy," she said, her voice low, accented. Spanish maybe, but with a hardness that spoke of a life lived on edges. "Kane, right?" "Yeah," Alex said, meeting her gaze. Her eyes were dark, unreadable, but there was something there. Suspicion, maybe, or something deeper. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Pick carefully, Kane. They're watching." Alex's jaw tightened. He glanced at the tablet, then back at her. She didn't blink, didn't look away. He tapped a name at random. Elena, 19, Romania, then handed the tablet back to Victor. "Done," he said, his voice flat. Victor checked the screen, nodded. "Good choice. You've got taste." He gestured to one of the men who led the girl off the platform and out of sight. Alex's stomach twisted, but he kept his face blank, his hands steady. Isabel watched him, her expression unreadable. "You're not what I expected," she said, almost to herself. "Likewise," Alex replied, holding her gaze. Victor clapped him on the shoulder, breaking the moment. "You're in, Kane. For now. Don't fuck it up." As they left the basement, Isabel fell into step beside him. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice so low he barely caught it. Alex didn't respond, but her words echoed in his head as they stepped back into the night. He'd passed the tests, crossed the line, but at what cost? The burner phone in his pocket buzzed, another message from Mullins. "Stay sharp. Clock's ticking." He deleted it, his jaw tight, and followed Victor to the car. 89 days left, and already he felt the mask slipping. Chapter 3. Blind Spot. The desert stretched out like a graveyard, endless and unforgiving under a moonless sky. Alex Rourke, Marcus Kane, sat in the passenger seat of a rusted panel van, the engine's low rumble vibrating through his bones. The air inside was thick with the smell of sweat and cheap cologne, and the driver, a wiry guy named Carlo with a twitchy eye, hadn't stopped chain-smoking since they crossed the border into Mexico. Alex kept his eyes on the road, a narrow ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through the sand, but his mind was elsewhere. 88 days left, and already the cracks in his cover were starting to show. "Relax, Kane," Carlo said, blowing a cloud of smoke that curled against the cracked windshield. "You look like you're waiting for a bullet." Alex didn't respond. He flexed his hands, the knuckles still raw from the fight with Dima 2 days ago. The bruises on his ribs ached with every breath, but pain was an old friend. What gnawed at him now wasn't the physical toll. It was the memory of that basement, the women on the platform, the way Isabel Vega's eyes had bored into him like she could see straight through Marcus Kane to the man beneath. She'd said he didn't belong. She was right, but he was in too deep to back out now. The van hit a pothole, jolting him back to the present. Carlo cursed under his breath, flicking his cigarette out the window. "This runs easy," he said as if trying to convince himself. "Pick up the cargo, drop it at the safe house. In and out, no cops, no problems." "Cargo," Alex repeated, his voice flat. He didn't need to ask what it meant. He'd seen the manifests, overheard the coded chatter. Women, maybe a dozen, smuggled across the border to be sold or shipped elsewhere. His job was to play muscle, keep the cargo in line, and make sure the handoff went smooth. Simple if you could stomach it. Alex wasn't sure he could. They pulled off the highway onto a dirt track, the van's headlights slicing through the darkness. A mile later, they reached a cluster of abandoned buildings, rusted trailers and crumbling adobe huts, relics of a town that had died long ago. A single floodlight cast harsh shadows, illuminating a group of men waiting by a blacked-out semi-truck. Alex recognized one of them, Victor, his gold chain glinting in the light, his shark eyes scanning the van as it rolled to a stop. "Out," Victor said, his voice carrying over the hum of the idling truck. "We're on a schedule." Alex stepped out, the desert air dry and sharp in his lungs. Carlo followed, muttering something about the heat. Victor gestured to the back of the semi, where two men were unloading crates, guns, maybe drugs. But Alex's gut told him the real cargo was inside the trailer. He glanced at Victor, who was lighting another cigarette, his face unreadable. "Where's Vega?" Alex asked, keeping his tone casual. Isabel hadn't been at the warehouse since the auction, but her absence felt like a warning. Victor exhaled smoke, his eyes narrowing. "She's busy. You don't need her for this. You need to focus." Alex nodded, but his instincts prickled. Isabel's absence wasn't random. She'd seen something in him, maybe too much. He pushed the thought aside as Victor led him to the trailer. The back doors were open, revealing a dozen women huddled inside, their wrists bound with zip ties, their faces pale and drawn. Some stared blankly at the floor, others flinched as the light hit them. Alex's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression blank, his hands loose at his sides. "Move them," Victor said, nodding to a nearby van. "Quickly." Alex climbed into the trailer, his boots thudding against the metal floor. The women shrank back, their eyes darting between him and the other men. He wanted to say something, anything to ease their fear, but words were a liability. Instead, he gestured for them to move, his voice low but firm. "Let's go. Now." They shuffled out, their movements sluggish, like they'd already given up. Alex followed, his hand hovering near the Beretta tucked into his waistband. He didn't trust Carlo, didn't trust Victor, didn't trust the men with AKs slung over their shoulders. And he sure as hell didn't trust the burner phone in his pocket, the one Captain Mullins had given him to report in. Her last message, "Stay sharp, clock's ticking," had been too vague, too cold, like she was playing a game he didn't understand. The transfer went smoothly until it didn't. One of the women, a girl no older than 20, stumbled as she climbed into the van. She hit the ground hard, her bound hands unable to break her fall. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, and she let out a soft, desperate sob. Alex's instinct was to help her up, but before he could move, Carlo was there, yanking her to her feet by her hair. "Move, bitch!" Carlo snarled, shoving her toward the van. The girl screamed, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the desert silence. One of the armed men spun, his AK raised, and shouted something in Spanish. Alex's hand went to his gun, his heart pounding. This was it, the moment things went sideways. "Enough!" Victor barked, stepping between Carlo and the girl. "We don't damage the merchandise." Carlo let go, muttering a curse, but the damage was done. The girl was shaking, her sobs muffled as she curled into herself. The other women froze, their eyes wide with fear. Alex's chest tightened, rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. He wanted to put a bullet in Carlo's head. Consequences be damned, but he couldn't. Not yet. "Get her in the van," Victor said, his eyes locking onto Alex. "You. Now." Alex nodded, stepping forward. He crouched beside the girl, his voice low. "Come on, you're okay." It was a lie, and they both knew it. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for something. Mercy, maybe, or hope. He didn't have either to give. He helped her to her feet, guiding her gently to the van, his touch as soft as he could make it without drawing attention. As he turned back, he caught Victor watching him, that not-quite smile on his face. "You're soft, Kane," Victor said, his voice low. "Careful. Soft gets you killed." Alex didn't respond. He climbed into the van, taking a seat near the back, where he could keep an eye on the women in the door. The engine roared to life, and they pulled away, the desert swallowing the abandoned town behind them. The safe house was a squat concrete bunker, half buried in the sand, its windows boarded up, its walls stained with rust and graffiti. Inside it was worse, damp, claustrophobic, the air thick with the smell of mold and fear. The women were herded into a back room, locked behind a steel door. Alex stood guard outside, his Beretta in hand, his mind racing. He needed to report in, but the mission was moving too fast, the lines too blurry. He pulled the burner phone from his pocket, checking for a signal. One bar flickering. He typed a quick message to Mullins. "Transport complete. Safe house secure. Need extraction plan for cargo." He hit send, then deleted the message, habit keeping him clean. But something felt off. The phone vibrated almost instantly, a reply from Mullins. "Hold position. No extraction yet. Await orders." Alex stared at the screen, his gut twisting. No extraction? That wasn't the plan. The deal was to track the routes, identify the players, and get the victims out. Mullins had promised a team on standby, ready to move when he gave the word. So why the delay? He pocketed the phone, his jaw tight, and scanned the room. Carlo was outside smoking again, while Victor was on a call, his voice low and clipped, speaking in Russian. That's when Alex heard it, a faint click, like static, coming from his pocket. He froze, his hand closing around the phone. He pulled it out, turning it over in his hand. The casing was intact, but there was a slight weight to it, a subtle difference he hadn't noticed before. He popped the back off, his fingers moving quickly, and there it was, a tiny black device, no bigger than a dime, nestled against the battery. A tracker. Not one of Mullins, he'd have been briefed on it. This was something else. His blood ran cold. Someone was watching him, and it wasn't just Vorya. He crushed the device under his boot, grinding it into the concrete. But the damage was done. Whoever planted it knew where he'd been, maybe even what he'd said. The question was who and why. Before he could process it, the steel door behind him burst open. One of the women, the same girl who'd fallen earlier, stumbled out, her zip ties cut, a shard of glass clutched in her trembling hand. Her eyes were wild, desperate, and she lunged at Alex, the glass aimed for his throat. Instinct took over. He sidestepped, grabbing her wrist and twisting until the glass fell to the floor. She screamed, fighting like a cornered animal, but she was no match for him. He pinned her against the wall, his forearm across her chest, his voice low and urgent. "Stop! You'll get us both killed." She spat in his face, her breath ragged. "You're one of them," she hissed, her accent thick. "You're all monsters." Alex's grip tightened, but his eyes softened. "I'm not," he whispered, so low only she could hear. "But you need to trust me." She stared at him, her chest heaving, doubt and fear warring in her eyes. Before she could respond, Carlo burst in, his gun drawn. "What the fuck is this?" Alex spun, keeping the girl behind him. "She got loose," he said, his voice steady. "I handled it." Carlo's eyes narrowed, his gun still raised. "Handled it?" "She's still breathing." Alex's hand twitched toward his Beretta, but he kept it holstered. Victor said no damage to the merchandise. Carlo hesitated, then lowered his gun, spitting on the floor. "You're too soft, Kane. Told you that'd get you killed." He grabbed the girl, yanking her back toward the door. She didn't scream this time, just stared at Alex, her eyes burning with something he couldn't name. As the door slammed shut, Alex's mind raced. He'd crossed a line tonight, not just in letting her live, but in what he'd said. "I'm not." 2 words, and they could cost him everything. He pulled the burner phone out again, typing a new message to Mullins. "Compromised. Tracker found. Explain." He hit send, then smashed the phone against the wall, the pieces scattering across the concrete. 88 days left, and the game was already slipping out of his control. He had a feeling Mullins wasn't just playing chess, she was playing with his life. Chapter 4. The Nameless One. The plane's engines droned like a funeral dirge, a low hum that vibrated through the metal walls of the cargo hold. Alex Rourke, Marcus Kane, sat on a crate, his back against a stack of wooden pallets, the air thick with the smell of jet fuel and stale sweat. The private jet wasn't built for comfort, not for someone like him. He was cargo, same as the crates around him, just another asset being shipped across the Atlantic to Eastern Europe. His hands were cuffed, not tightly, but enough to remind him who was in charge. Victor sat across from him, cleaning his nails with a switchblade, his shark eyes glinting in the dim light. "You look tired, Kane," Victor said, not looking up. "Long night?" Alex didn't answer. He hadn't slept in 2 days, not since the safe house in Mexico, not since he'd crushed that tracker under his boot and smashed the burner phone. 87 days left, and the mission was already unraveling. Captain Mullins hadn't responded to his last message, hadn't explained the tracker, hadn't given him anything but silence. That silence was louder than any order she'd ever given. The jet hit turbulence, jostling the crates. Alex's cuffs rattled, and he flexed his wrists, testing the give. Not enough to slip free, but enough to work with if it came to that. He glanced at Victor, who was still focused on his blade, carving away at nothing. "Where are we going?" Alex asked, keeping his voice flat. Victor's lips twitched, that not quite smile again. "Somewhere cold. Somewhere you don't ask questions?" Alex leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. He didn't need to ask. He'd heard the whispers at the safe house, the coded chatter about the boss and the meeting. Nikolai Zorin, the ghost who ran Vorya, the man who turned human lives into profit margins. Alex had seen his file, grainy photos, incomplete intel, a rap sheet that spanned 3 continents. Zorin wasn't just a criminal, he was a myth, untouchable, always one step ahead of the law. And now Alex was being flown to meet him, like a lamb to the slaughter. The jet landed hours later, the wheels screeching against a private airstrip carved into a frozen landscape. Snow fell in thick flakes, blanketing the ground, muffling the world outside. Alex stepped off the plane, the cuffs still on, his breath clouding in the biting air. They were somewhere in Eastern Europe, Ukraine maybe, or Belarus. The signs were in Cyrillic, the men armed with Kalashnikovs speaking in low, guttural Russian. Victor led him to a black SUV, its engine already running, and shoved him into the back seat. "Keep your mouth shut," Victor said, climbing in beside him. "He doesn't like talkers." The drive was long, the road winding through snow-covered forests and past villages that looked abandoned, their windows dark and lifeless. Alex's mind churned, piecing together the fragments of the mission. The tracker in his phone had been a shock, but not a surprise. Undercover work was a house of mirrors, trust was a lie, and everyone was watching. But Mullins' silence was something else, a crack in the foundation he couldn't ignore. Was she compromised? Or was she playing a deeper game, one where Marcus Kane was expendable? The SUV pulled up to a gated compound, its walls topped with razor wire, its guards armed and silent. The house itself was a fortress, gray stone, high windows, a roof dusted with snow. Inside it was different, polished marble floors, chandeliers that glittered like ice, and the faint sound of classical music drifting from somewhere deep within. Alex's cuffs were removed, but the weight of the place pressed down on him, heavy as any chain. Victor led him to a study, its walls lined with bookshelves, a fire crackling in a massive hearth. A man stood by the window, his back to them, his silhouette sharp against the snow outside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his hair silver but not from age, more like the glint of a blade. When he turned, his face was angular, almost aristocratic, with eyes that seemed to see through flesh and bone. Nikolai Zorin. "Marcus Kane," Zorin said, his voice smooth, accented, like velvet over steel. "You've made quite an impression." Alex stood still, his hands loose at his sides, his face a mask. Just doing my job. Zoran smiled, a slow, predatory thing. He gestured to a leather chair across from a mahogany desk. Sit. We have much to discuss. Alex sat, his eyes never leaving Zoran. Victor lingered by the door, his switchblade gone, but his presence a reminder. One wrong move, and this room would be a tomb. Zoran poured 2 glasses of vodka from a crystal decanter, sliding one across the desk to Alex. Drink, he said. It's tradition. Alex took the glass, sipped. The burn was sharp, clean, but he barely tasted it. His focus was on Zoran, on the way the man moved, deliberate and controlled, like a chess player who'd already seen the endgame. You're not what I expected, Zoran said, leaning back in his chair. A man with your history, armed robbery, assault, a stint in Joliet, and yet here you are climbing the ranks of Voria in record time. Impressive, or suspicious. Alex's pulse ticked up, but he kept his expression blank. I'm good at what I do. Zoran's eyes narrowed, studying him. I know who you are, Marcus. I know what you are. A man running from his past, yes? A father who left bruises, a mother who drank herself to death, a wife who... He paused, his smile sharpening. Well, let's just say you've lost more than most. Alex's blood ran cold. Zoran's words weren't guesses. They were precise, surgical, cutting into truths buried deep in his file, truths even Mullins shouldn't have shared. His wife Emily, her death, the case that had broken him, wasn't in the Marcus Kane legend. That was Alex Rourke's story, locked away in a sealed FBI report. How the hell did Zoran know? He forced a shrug, leaning back in the chair. Everyone's got a past. Doesn't mean I'm here to talk about it. Zoran laughed, a low, rumbling sound. No, you're here to work. But let me give you a piece of advice, Marcus. In this world, everyone wears a mask, even those who claim to be justice itself, especially them. Trust no one, not even your own reflection. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Alex's mind raced, but he kept his face blank, his voice steady. Noted. Zoran stood, moving to the window again. You'll be useful, I think, but usefulness has a price. Tonight, you'll prove it. Before Alex could ask what he meant, the door burst open. 2 men dragged in a third, his face bloodied, his hands cuffed behind his back. He was older, mid-40s, with a lean build and eyes that darted like a trapped animal's. Alex's stomach dropped. He recognized him, not by name, but by the look. Another undercover, probably FBI, someone else playing the same deadly game. This is Ivan, Zoran said, his voice calm. Ivan thought he could lie to us. Thought he could wear a mask we wouldn't see through. He turned to Alex, his eyes glinting. You know what we do with liars, don't you, Marcus? Alex's heart pounded, but he kept his mask in place. He stood, stepping closer to the man. Ivan's eyes met his, wide with panic, a silent plea. Don't do this. Alex's hand twitched toward his Beretta, but he stopped himself. One wrong move, and he'd be exposed. His mission over, his life forfeit. Do it, Zoran said, his voice a command. Or we start asking questions about you. Alex's mind screamed, searching for a way out. He couldn't kill a fellow agent, not even to save his cover. But refusing meant blowing everything. 90 days, the women in the safe house, the chance to bring Voria down. He drew his gun, slow and deliberate, his eyes locked on Ivan's. The man's lips moved, a silent whisper. Don't. Before Alex could decide, Ivan lunged, not at him, but at Zoran, his cuffed hands swinging wildly. It was suicide, and he knew it. Victor moved faster than Alex thought possible, his switchblade flashing. Ivan hit the floor, blood pooling beneath him, his throat a red ruin. Alex stood frozen, the gun still in his hand, his breath caught in his chest. Zoran didn't flinch, didn't even look at the body. Clean this up, he said to Victor, then turned to Alex. You hesitated, Marcus. Don't let it happen again. Victor dragged Ivan's body out, leaving a smear of blood on the marble floor. Alex holstered his gun, his hands steady but his mind a storm. Zoran knew too much, saw too much. And Ivan, another agent, dead because he'd been made. How? A leak? A traitor? Mullen's silence loomed larger now, a shadow he couldn't shake. Zoran poured another glass of vodka, handing it to Alex. "You're still here," he said, his voice almost amused. "That's a start, but the real work begins tomorrow. Get some rest." Alex nodded, downing the vodka in one gulp. The burn did nothing to dull the questions burning in his mind. As he left the study, the firelight casting long shadows across the room, Zoran's words echoed. "Everyone wears a mask." Alex felt his own slipping, and for the first time, he wondered if he'd make it out alive. Outside, the snow fell heavier, burying the world in white. Alex's new burner phone, given to him by Victor, vibrated in his pocket. No message, just a single missed call from an unknown number. Mullins or someone else? He didn't know, but one thing was clear. The game had changed, and he was running out of moves. Chapter 5: The Third Face. Budapest streets glittered under a thin layer of frost, the city's old-world charm cloaked in a winter haze. Alex Rourke, Marcus Kane, moved through the crowd along Vasi Street, his breath clouding in the cold air, his new burner phone heavy in his pocket. The weight of Nikolai Zoran's words still lingered, sharp as the wind cutting through his jacket. Everyone wears a mask. 86 days left, and Alex was starting to wonder how many masks he could wear before he lost himself completely. The meeting with Zoran in the snowy compound had shaken him more than he'd admit. The man's knowledge of his past, his father, his mother, Emily, wasn't just a threat. It was a violation. A blade slipped between the ribs of his carefully constructed cover. And then there was Ivan, the undercover agent, throat slashed before Alex could pull the trigger or walk away. A warning, clear as day. Vorya didn't just kill traitors, they erased them. Alex's fingers twitched, itching for a cigarette he didn't smoke, a habit he'd buried with his old life. He turned into a narrow alley, the noise of the tourist-packed street fading behind him. The rendezvous point was a cafe tucked between a pawn shop and a boarded-up bookstore, its sign faded but legible. Cave zo fekete, black coffee. Fitting, he thought. Everything about this mission was dark, murky, impossible to see through. Inside, the cafe was dim, its air thick with the smell of espresso and old wood. A handful of patrons sat at scattered tables, their faces hidden behind newspapers or glowing phone screens. Alex scanned the room, his instincts on edge. No Victor, no armed goons, just her, Isabel Vega, sitting in a corner booth, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes locked on him like a predator tracking prey. "You're late," she said as he slid into the booth across from her. Her voice was low, accented, with that same hard edge he'd noticed at the auction. But there was something else now, a flicker of something he couldn't name. Exhaustion, maybe, or doubt. "Traffic," Alex said, his tone dry, echoing his first night with Vorya. He leaned back, studying her. She wore a black leather jacket, a scarf loosely draped around her neck, and her hands rested on the table, fingers drumming a rhythm only she could hear. Dangerous, yes, but different. Not like Victor or Zoran. She was a puzzle, and Alex hated puzzles. Isabel's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You're funny, Kane. That's dangerous in a place like this." "So sitting alone in a cafe, waiting for a guy you don't trust," he shot back. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she slid a manila envelope across the table. "Your next job, from Zoran." Alex opened the envelope, pulling out a single sheet of paper. Coordinates, a time, a name. Server Tarum 7, Server Room 7, a data hub in Budapest's industrial district, one of Vorya's nerve centers. The instructions were simple. Infiltrate the facility, download transit logs, and get out. The kind of job that sounded easy but screamed trap. He folded the paper, tucking it into his jacket. "Why are you giving me this? Where's Victor?" "Victor's busy," she said, echoing Zoran's evasiveness from the compound. "And I'm here because I asked to be." Alex raised an eyebrow. "You asked to babysit the new guy?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I asked because I'm tired, Kane. Tired of the blood, the deals, the cages. I want out." The words hit him like a punch. He searched her face for a lie, a tell, but her eyes were steady, unyielding. "Out," he repeated, his voice low. You think Zoran lets people walk away? Not walk, she said. Run, disappear. But I need those logs first. They're my ticket. Alex's mind raced. Was this a test? A trap? Or was Isabel Vega, Vorya's sharpest blade, really looking for a way out? He leaned back, crossing his arms. Why tell me? You don't know me. I know enough, she said. You're not like the others. You hesitate. You care. That's a weakness, but it's also a chance. He snorted, masking the unease creeping up his spine. You're reading me wrong, Vega. I'm here to do a job, same as you. Are you? Her eyes bored into him, and for a moment he felt exposed, like she could see Alex Rourke behind Marcus Kane. I saw you at the auction. You didn't want to bid. You didn't want to be there. And in Mexico with that girl, you could have let Carlo kill her. You didn't. Alex's jaw tightened. She was too perceptive, too close. You're seeing what you want to see. Maybe, she said, leaning back, or maybe I'm seeing a man who's not as lost as he thinks. He didn't respond, letting the silence stretch. The cafe's hum filled the gap. Clinking cups, murmured conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine. Finally he spoke, his voice low. If you're serious, what's the play? She glanced around, ensuring no one was listening, then leaned in again. The server room, it's not just transit logs. It's names, accounts, routes, everything Vorya uses to move people. We get that data, we can sell it, trade it, or burn it. Either way, it's leverage. For both of us. Alex's gut twisted. This was his mission. Get the data, map the network, bring Vorya down. But partnering with Isabel was a gamble. If she was lying, he'd be walking into a trap. If she was telling the truth, she was a liability, someone who could blow his cover with a single word. And yet, the idea of an ally, even a dangerous one, was tempting. He was alone, cut off from Mullins, with a smashed phone and a ticking clock. All right, he said finally, we do it together. But if you're playing me, Vega, I'll know. She smiled, a real one this time, sharp and fleeting. Fair enough. Tomorrow night. Meet me at the riverfront, near the chain bridge. Midnight. He nodded, memorizing the details. As she stood to leave, he grabbed her wrist, his grip firm but not threatening. One question, why now? What changed? Her smile faded, and for a moment, her mask slipped, revealing something raw, almost broken. I've been in this too long, Kane. You'll understand soon enough. She pulled free and walked out, her silhouette swallowed by the frost-covered street. Alex sat there, the envelope heavy in his jacket, his mind churning. Isabel Vega was a wild card, and he didn't trust her, but he needed her, or at least he needed what she knew. The next night, the Danube River glittered under Budapest's lights, the chain bridge looming like a steel sentinel. Alex stood in the shadows of a riverside warehouse, his breath visible in the freezing air. Isabel was already there, dressed in black, a backpack slung over one shoulder. She moved like a ghost, silent and precise, her eyes scanning the darkness. You're on time, she said, her voice low. Good. Let's get this done, Alex replied, his hand resting near the Beretta tucked into his waistband. The server room was a mile away, a nondescript building in the industrial district, guarded by cameras and a small army of Vorya's men. Breaking in would be hard. Getting out would be harder. Isabel handed him a small device, a USB drive with a blinking red light. Plug this into the main terminal. It'll do the rest. 10 minutes, max. He pocketed the drive, his eyes on her. And if we get caught, we don't, she said, her tone flat, or we're dead. They moved through the city like shadows, sticking to alleys and side streets, avoiding the glow of streetlights. The industrial district was a maze of concrete and steel, the air heavy with the smell of oil and rust. The server room was a low gray building, its windows dark, its perimeter patrolled by two men with AKs. Alex and Isabel crouched behind a stack of crates, watching, waiting. 2 guards, Alex whispered. You got a plan? She nodded, pulling a silenced pistol from her backpack. Distraction, you take the left, I'll take the right. Non-lethal if you can. He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. They split up, moving silently. Alex crept along the fence, his heart steady despite the adrenaline. He reached the guard on the left, a stocky man lighting a cigarette. One quick strike to the temple, and the man crumpled, out cold. Alex dragged him into the shadows, binding his hands with zip ties from his pocket. Isabel was already at the door when he rejoined her. The second guard down, a dart in his neck. "Tranquilizer," she said, catching his look. "Faster than a fist." They slipped inside, the building's interior cold and sterile, lit by flickering fluorescence. The server room was at the end of a long hallway, behind a locked door. Isabel pulled a lockpick set from her bag, her fingers moving with practiced ease. 30 seconds later, the door clicked open. The room hummed with the low buzz of servers, their lights blinking like eyes in the dark. Alex found the main terminal, plugging in the USB drive. The screen flickered, a progress bar appearing. Downloading, 10%. He glanced at Isabel, who was watching the door, her pistol ready. 5 minutes, she whispered, "then we're gone." That's when the alarm screamed, a shrill wail that shattered the silence. Red lights flashed, and footsteps echoed down the hall. Too many, too fast. Alex's heart sank. Trap. He yanked the USB drive, the download at 60%, and shoved it into his pocket. "Move!" Isabel hissed, already at the door. They ran, the hallway a blur of red and shadow. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets chewing into the walls. Alex dove behind a server rack, returning fire with his Beretta, dropping one of Vorya's men. Isabel was a step ahead, her silenced pistol spitting darts, but there were too many. They burst out a side exit, the cold air hitting them like a slap, and sprinted for the river. They made it halfway across the district when a black SUV screeched to a stop, blocking their path. Victor stepped out, his switchblade glinting under sodium lights. "Going somewhere, Kane?" he called, his voice dripping with menace. Alex's hand tightened on his gun, but Isabel grabbed his arm. "Don't. We can talk our way out." Victor approached, his eyes flicking to Isabel. "You too, Vega? I thought you were smarter." "It's not what you think," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "We were securing the data." For Zoran, Victor laughed, cold and sharp. "Zoran doesn't like surprises, and you two are full of them." Before Alex could react, Isabel stepped forward, her hands raised. "Call him. Now he'll tell you." Victor hesitated, then pulled out his phone, speaking rapidly in Russian. Alex's pulse pounded, his eyes scanning for an escape. The river was close, but swimming in this cold would be suicide. He glanced at Isabel, her face unreadable. Was she selling him out or buying time? Victor hung up, his expression darkening. "Zoran wants you both, alive, for now." He gestured to the SUV. "Get in." As they climbed in, Alex's mind raced. The USB drive burned in his pocket, incomplete but damning. And then there was Isabel, her words about wanting out, her calm under pressure, her connection to this world he didn't fully understand. As the SUV pulled away, he caught her eye, and she mouthed a single word. Mullins. His blood ran cold. Captain Mullins. The name shouldn't be here. Not in Budapest. Not from Isabel's lips. Was she an ally? A traitor? Or something else entirely? The SUV sped through the city, the river fading behind them, and Alex felt the walls closing in. 86 days left, and the masks were multiplying. His own, Isabel's, and now maybe Mullins. He didn't know who to trust, but one thing was clear. The truth was a luxury he couldn't afford. This chapter deepens the dynamic between Alex and Isabel, introducing her as a potential ally with her own agenda, while escalating the danger with the botched data heist. The revelation of her connection to Mullins adds a new layer of intrigue, blurring the lines of trust and betrayal. Chapter 6, Double Mission. The Mexican sun burned like a furnace, turning the air into a shimmering haze that clung to the skin. Alex Rourke, Marcus Kane, crouched behind a stack of rusted oil drums, the heat radiating through his jacket, his Beretta heavy in his hand. The warehouse loomed ahead, a squat concrete box in the middle of nowhere, its walls pitted with bullet scars and graffiti. Inside, according to Isabel Vega's intel, were over 30 women, locked in cages like animals, waiting to be shipped to God knows where. Alex's job was to secure the perimeter, play the loyal Vorya soldier, and wait for the FBI's extraction team to swoop in. Except the extraction team wasn't coming. He knew it in his gut, had known it since Budapest, since Mullins' silence, since the tracker in his phone. 85 days left, and the mission was a house of cards in a windstorm. Isabel crouched beside him, her silenced pistol ready, her eyes scanning the warehouse's perimeter. She'd been quiet since the SUV ride from Budapest, since she'd mouthed Mullins like it was a curse. Alex hadn't pressed her, not yet. Trust was a tightrope, and they were both one misstep from falling. But her words about wanting out, about the server logs being her ticket, had stuck with him. She was either his only ally or his biggest threat. Maybe both. 2 guards at the south entrance, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of cicadas. 1 on the roof. Sniper, probably. Alex nodded, his eyes tracking the guards' movements. They were Vorya's muscle, big, armed, and sloppy. The one on the roof was smoking, his rifle propped against a vent. Amateur, but amateurs with guns were still dangerous. You take the roof, Alex said. I'll handle the door. She gave him a sharp look, her dark eyes unreadable. Don't miss, Kane. We're on borrowed time. He didn't respond, just moved, keeping low as he skirted the edge of the lot. The plan was simple. Neutralize the guards, get inside, secure the women, and hold until Mullins' team arrived. Except the burner phone in his pocket, new issued by Victor after Budapest, hadn't buzzed in days. No updates, no coordinates, no confirmation of the extraction. Mullins had promised a team on standby, ready to move when he gave the signal. So where the hell were they? He reached the south entrance, pressing himself against the wall. The 2 guards were chatting, their AKs slung loosely over their shoulders. Alex waited, his breath steady, his mind racing. The USB drive from Budapest was still in his jacket, its partial data a ticking bomb. 60% of Vorya's transit logs, routes, names, dates, enough to map half their network, but not enough to end it. And Isabel's connection to Mullins, whatever it was another puzzle piece he couldn't place. He moved fast, silent, using the butt of his Beretta to knock out the first guard. The second turned, reaching for his gun, but Alex was faster, slamming him into the wall, a forearm to the throat. The man went limp, eyes rolling back. Alex zip-tied their hands, dragging them into the shadows. Above, he heard a soft thud. Isabel's work. The sniper was down. She joined him at the door, her tranquilizer pistol still in hand. Clean, she said, her voice flat. You? Clean, he replied, holstering his Beretta. Let's move. The warehouse door creaked open, revealing a cavernous space lit by flickering fluorescence. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and something metallic, blood maybe, or rust. Cages lined the walls, metal bars rusted but sturdy, each holding a cluster of women. Some were curled up, silent. Others stared with hollow eyes, their faces gaunt from hunger or despair. Alex's stomach twisted, but he kept his face blank, his hands steady. 32, he counted. 32 lives, and he was their only shot. Isabel moved to the nearest cage, pulling a lockpick from her jacket. Cover me, she whispered. Alex nodded, taking position near the door, his Beretta ready. He scanned the room, empty for now, but Vorya's men would be back. The plan was to free the women, move them to a side exit, and wait for the extraction team. But the clock was ticking, and the silence from Mullins was deafening. Isabel popped the first lock, helping a woman out. She was young, maybe 18, her wrists raw from zip ties. Stay quiet, Isabel murmured, moving to the next cage. Alex kept watch, his eyes flicking to the shadows, his instincts screaming. Something was wrong. The warehouse was too quiet, too empty. Where were the rest of Vorya's men? Where was Victor? That's when the doors exploded inward, a blast of sound and light that sent Alex diving for cover. Gunfire erupted, automatic weapons chewing through the air. Vorya's men poured in, 6, maybe 8, armed with AKs and shotguns. Not guards, enforcers. This wasn't a patrol, it was an ambush. Down, Alex shouted, shoving Isabel behind a crate. The women in the cages screamed, some scrambling to the back, others frozen in terror. Bullets ricocheted off the metal bars, sparks flying. Alex returned fire, dropping one man with a clean shot to the chest. Isabel's pistol hissed, a dart hitting another in the neck. But there were too many and they were pinned. "Who tipped them?" Alex growled, reloading behind the crate. "Not me," Isabel snapped, her eyes blazing. "You think I'd set this up?" He didn't answer. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. He peeked out, firing again, catching another man in the leg. The enforcers were advancing, their gunfire relentless. Alex's mind raced. No extraction team, no backup. Just him, Isabel, and 32 women trapped in a kill box. "We need to move," he said, grabbing her arm. "Side exit, now." She nodded, pulling a smoke grenade from her backpack. She yanked the pin, tossing it into the center of the room. Thick gray clouds billowed, choking the air, buying them seconds. They ran, Alex covering the rear, Isabel leading the way. The women followed, stumbling, some sobbing, others silent with shock. The side exit was a rusted metal door, half hidden behind a stack of crates. Isabel kicked it open, the hinges screaming, and they spilled into the desert heat. Outside, the night was alive with chaos. 2 more SUVs screeched into the lot, their headlights blinding. Victor stepped out of one, his gold chain glinting, his switchblade already in hand. "Kane!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the gunfire. "Vega, you're done!" Alex's heart sank, betrayed. But by who? He pushed the women toward a ditch, shouting, "Stay low!" Isabel was beside him, her pistol empty, her face grim. "We can't fight them all," she said. "Then we don't," Alex replied, his mind racing. He pulled the USB drive from his pocket, tossing it to her. "Get this out, find a way." She caught it, her eyes wide. "What about you?" "I'll hold them off," he said, reloading his Beretta. "Go." She hesitated, then nodded, sprinting into the darkness with the women. Alex turned back, facing Victor and his men. 6 against 1, and no backup. The math wasn't good, but he'd faced worse odds. He fired, dropping one man, then dove behind an oil drum as bullets tore through the air. Victor laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You're good, Kane, but not that good." Alex's mind churned. No extraction team. Mullins had lied. Or worse, she'd sold him out. He thought of the tracker, her silence, the way she'd looked at him during the briefing, like she was measuring him for a coffin. He fired again, clipping another man. But the return fire was relentless, pinning him down. Then he saw it, a glint of metal in the distance, a satellite dish on a nearby hill. If he could reach it, he could send a signal, maybe to someone outside Mullins' chain of command. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. He broke cover, sprinting across the lot, bullets kicking up dirt around him. He reached the dish, pulling a small transmitter from his jacket, a backup he'd kept hidden, one Mullins didn't know about. He typed a coded message to an old contact in internal affairs. "Compromised, Mexico. Voria, Mullins suspect." He hit send, praying it went through. Then a bullet grazed his arm, a hot streak of pain that sent him stumbling. He turned, firing blindly, and saw Victor advancing, his switchblade glinting. "You're dead, Kane!" he shouted. Alex dove behind the dish, his breath ragged. Blood dripped from his arm, soaking his sleeve. He was out of options, out of time. Then he heard it. Sirens, faint but growing louder. Not FBI, local police maybe, or federales. Someone had tipped them off. Isabel. He didn't know. The SUVs peeled out, Victor cursing as he climbed in. Alex stayed low, watching them disappear into the night. The sirens grew closer, and he knew he couldn't stay. He staggered to his feet, clutching his arm, and ran into the desert. The women's faces burned into his mind. Hours later, he found a payphone in a dusty border town, its neon sign flickering like a dying star. His arm throbbed, the wound hastily bandaged with a strip of his shirt. He dialed a secure line, one he hadn't used in years, to his old contact in internal affairs. "It's me," he said when the line picked up. "Check the financials. Mullins. Look for a shell company. Global Transit Solutions." The voice on the other end was gruff, skeptical. "You sure about this, Rourke?" "No," Alex admitted. But I found a ledger in Budapest. Payments to that company routed through Vorya's accounts. Mullen's name was on the transfer. A long pause. I'll look. Stay alive. Alex hung up, his chest tight. Global Transit Solutions. He'd seen the name in the partial data from the USB drive, buried in a list of shell companies Vorya used to launder money. Mullen's name shouldn't have been there, but it was. A coincidence? Or proof she was playing both sides? He didn't know, but the betrayal cut deeper than the bullet in his arm. He stepped into the night, the desert stretching endless before him. Isabel was gone, the women were scattered, and Vorya was still standing. 85 days left, and Alex was alone, bleeding and running out of moves. The only thing keeping him going was the truth, or what was left of it. Chapter 7. Traces in the Fire. The desert night was a black void, swallowing sound and light except for the distant howl of coyotes and the faint glow of a border town's neon signs. Alex Rourke, Marcus Kane, crouched behind a rusted water tank, his breath shallow, his wounded arm throbbing under a makeshift bandage. The bullet grazed from the warehouse raid burned like a brand, but pain was the least of his problems. 84 days left, and the mission was unraveling faster than he could stitch it together. Vorya's ambush, the missing extraction team, Mullen's name on a ledger tied to a shell company, it all pointed to a betrayal he couldn't yet name. And Isabel Vega, his only potential ally, was gone, vanished with the USB drive and 32 women into the Mexican night. He clutched the satellite transmitter in his good hand, its faint green light blinking in the dark. It was a relic, a piece of tech he'd kept from his days working narco cases, hidden even from Mullens. The message he'd sent to his old contact in internal affairs, compromised, Mexico, Vorya, Mullens suspect, had gone through, but there'd been no reply. Not yet. He needed more than a distress call. He needed evidence. The USB drive was with Isabel, but he'd memorized enough of its data, routes, dates, a few names, to send a partial package. If he could get it to internal affairs, it might be enough to start unraveling Vorya's network, or at least to prove Mullens was dirty. He scanned the horizon, the desert stretching endless under a starless sky. The warehouse was miles behind him, its chaos a fading echo, but Vorya's reach wasn't. Victor's voice still rang in his ears. "You're done, Kane." They knew something, maybe not that he was a cop, but enough to suspect he wasn't just another thug. The question was who had tipped them off. Isabel, Mullens, or someone else watching from the shadows. Alex powered up the transmitter, its screen casting a faint glow on his face. He typed quickly, his fingers stiff from the cold. Partial Vorya transit logs. Routes, Tijuana to Chicago, Budapest to Istanbul. Shell Company, Global Transit Solutions. Mullens linked, need extraction. Coordinates follow. He added his location, a rough estimate based on the stars and the town's lights, then hit send. The transmitter hummed, a signal shooting into the void. He prayed it reached his contact, a grizzled internal affairs agent named Tom Carver, one of the few people he still trusted. If anyone could dig into Mullens' financials without tipping her off, it was Carver. He stashed the transmitter in his jacket, his eyes scanning the darkness. The payphone call earlier had confirmed his suspicions. Global Transit Solutions wasn't just a front, it was a pipeline, funneling Vorya's profits through a maze of offshore accounts. And Mullens' name, buried in a single transfer, was a thread he couldn't ignore. Was she playing both sides, using him as a pawn to take down Zoran and claim the empire for herself? The thought made his blood boil, but he pushed it down. Anger was a distraction. He needed to move. The town was a half-mile away, a cluster of low buildings and flickering signs. He needed a vehicle, supplies, and a way back across the border. But first, he needed to disappear. Vorya would be hunting him, and they didn't hunt alone. He started walking, keeping low, his Beretta ready. The desert was quiet, but it felt alive, like eyes were watching from every shadow. The town was a speck on the map, a place called San Ignacio, all dust and desperation. Alex slipped into an alley behind a cantina, its music spilling out in a drunken slur of guitars and laughter. He found a dumpster, its lid propped open, and rummaged for anything useful. Clothes, food, anything to blend in. A tattered poncho, stained but usable, was his only find. He pulled it over his jacket, wincing as the movement tugged at his wound. Inside the cantina, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of cheap tequila. Alex kept his head down, sliding into a corner booth. The bartender, a heavy-set man with a missing tooth, eyed him but said nothing. Alex ordered a beer, paying with crumpled bills from the duffel bag he'd carried since Chicago. He sipped slowly, his eyes scanning the room. No Vorya, no Victor, but the hairs on his neck stood up. Someone was watching. His new burner phone, Victor's replacement, vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting another cryptic message from Mullins. Instead, it was a single line from an unknown number. Traitor. $500,000 for your head. His stomach dropped. Vorya had put a bounty on him. The message was in Russian, but the intent was universal. He was marked, a target for every lowlife with a gun and a debt to pay. He deleted the message, his jaw tight. The cantina's noise faded as his mind raced. A bounty meant Vorya suspected a leak, and he was the prime candidate. The ambush at the warehouse, the missing extraction team, it all pointed to someone feeding them intel. Isabel had vanished with the women and the USB drive. But was she running from Vorya or setting him up? And Mullins, her silence was a scream now, louder than ever. He needed to move, but the cantina's door swung open and two men walked in. They weren't locals. Too clean, too sharp, their eyes scanning the room like predators. Vorya's hunters or bounty chasers. Alex slid lower in the booth, pulling the poncho's hood over his face. His Beretta was under the table, safety off, his finger brushing the trigger. The men spoke to the bartender in low tones, their hands gesturing toward the back. Alex caught a glimpse of a tattoo on one man's wrist, a Vorya mark, a stylized wolf's head. They were here for him. He weighed his options. Fight, run, or hide. Fighting meant blood, and blood meant attention. Running was better, but not yet. He waited until the men moved toward the back, then slipped out of the booth, keeping to the shadows. The alley was his best shot. He pushed through the door, the night air hitting him like a slap. But as he turned, a figure stepped out from behind a stack of crates. A woman, her silhouette sharp against the neon glow. Isabel. "Kane," she said, her voice low, urgent. Her pistol was in her hand, not aimed but ready. "You're a hard man to find." Alex's grip tightened on his Beretta, but he didn't raise it. "Where the hell have you been, Vega?" "Saving those women," she said, stepping closer. Her face was drawn, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "They're safe for now, hidden in a church north of here. But you're not." "No shit," he said, glancing back at the cantina. "Bounty on my head. $500,000. You here to collect?" She snorted, a sound that was almost a laugh. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. I'm here because we're both fucked." He studied her, searching for the lie. Her eyes were steady, but there was something else. Fear, maybe, or desperation. "The USB drive," he said. "You still have it?" She nodded, patting her jacket. "Safe, but it's not enough. We need more. Zorn's inner circle, his accounts. Without it, we're just running." "We?" Alex raised an eyebrow. "Last I checked, you were gone, and I was dodging bullets." "I had to get them out," she said, her voice sharp. "You think I planned that ambush? Someone sold us out, Kane, and it wasn't me." He wanted to believe her, but trust was a blade that cut both ways. "Mullins," he said, testing her. "You mentioned her in Budapest. What's the connection?" Isabel's jaw tightened, and for a moment she looked away. "She's complicated. I've worked with her before. Not Vorya, but other ops. She's got her own agenda, always has. I don't know if she's dirty, but I know she's not clean." Alex's stomach twisted. It wasn't proof, but it was close. Mullins, his lifeline, his handler, tied to Vorya through a shell company, and now Isabel. "Why tell me now?" he asked. "Because we're out of time," she said. "Vorya's closing in. They know there's a traitor, and they think it's you. Maybe me too. We need to move together, or we're both dead." Before he could respond, the cantina door banged open, and the two Vorya men stepped into the alley, their guns drawn. "Kane!" one shouted, his voice thick with an accent. "No running this time!" Alex dove behind the crates, pulling Isabel with him. Bullets tore into the wood, splinters flying. He returned fire, his Beretta barking, catching one man in the shoulder. The other ducked, shouting into a radio. Reinforcements were coming. "Go!" Alex hissed, shoving Isabel toward the alley's end. She ran, her footsteps silent, and he followed, firing over his shoulder. They rounded a corner, sprinting through the town's narrow streets, the neon lights blurring into streaks. A stolen pickup truck was their salvation, parked behind a gas station, its keys still in the ignition. Alex hot-wired it in seconds, the engine roaring to life. They peeled out, the desert swallowing the town behind them. Isabel clutched the USB drive, her knuckles white. "Where to?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. "North," Alex said, his eyes on the road. "The border. We need to get that data to someone who can use it." She nodded, but her eyes were distant. "You sent something, didn't you? Back there with that transmitter." He glanced at her, surprised. "You saw?" "I see a lot," she said. "Who was it?" "Internal Affairs," he admitted. "Old contact. Only one I trust." She didn't respond, just stared out the window. The silence was heavy, broken only by the truck's rumble. Alex's mind churned. Isabel's disappearance after the warehouse, her sudden return, her knowledge of Mullins. It all added up to something, but he couldn't see the shape of it. Was she running from Voria or leading him into a trap? They drove for hours, the desert giving way to scrubland, then the faint lights of a border crossing. Alex pulled off the road, hiding the truck behind a cluster of boulders. "We walk from here," he said. "Too hot to drive across?" Isabel nodded, slipping the USB drive into a hidden pocket in her jacket. "If we get caught, they'll kill us both." "Then we don't get caught," he said, checking his Beretta. 3 rounds left. Not enough, but it would have to do. They moved through the night, keeping low, the border fence looming like a steel scar. Alex's arm ached, his wound seeping through the bandage, but he pushed through. The crossing was quiet, the guards distracted by a late-night card game. They slipped through a gap in the fence, the desert stretching endless on the other side. But as they reached the U.S. side, headlights flared, pinning them in a harsh white glow. An SUV blocked their path, and Victor stepped out, his switchblade glinting. "You're predictable, Kane," he said, his voice cold. "And Vega thought you were smarter." Alex raised his gun, but Isabel grabbed his arm. "Don't! We can't win this." Victor laughed, stepping closer. "Zoran wants you alive. For now. Drop the gun." Alex hesitated, his finger on the trigger. Isabel's eyes met his, a silent plea. He lowered the Beretta, letting it fall to the sand. Victor's men moved in, binding their hands, shoving them into the SUV. As they sped away, Alex caught Isabel's gaze again. She mouthed one word. "Sorry." The word hit like a bullet. Sorry for what? The ambush? The bounty? Or something worse? 84 days left, and Alex was out of answers, out of trust, out of time. The only thing he knew for sure was that Voria's net was tightening, and he was the one caught in it. Chapter 8, Caught in the Crossfire. The Serbian night was a shroud of mist and shadow, the air heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. Alex Rourke, Marcus Kane, stumbled through a forest outside Belgrade, his breath ragged, his left arm hanging limp, blood soaking through the crude bandage from the Mexican desert. The bullet grazed from the warehouse raid had festered, and now a fresh wound, a deep gash across his side from a Voria enforcer's knife, bled with every step. 83 days left, and he was running on fumes, hunted like an animal by Voria's kill squad. The $500,000 bounty on his head had turned every thug in Eastern Europe into a predator, and Alex was the prey. He gripped a stolen Makarov pistol, its magazine half empty, his good hand slick with sweat and blood. The SUV ride from the US-Mexico border had been a blur. Victor's men had blindfolded him and Isabel, driven them to a private airstrip, and flown them to Serbia. No explanation, no destination, just the cold promise of Zoran's judgment. Isabel had been silent, her apology, sorry, echoing in his mind like a warning shot. Then at a remote airstrip outside Belgrade, she'd vanished again, slipping away during a chaotic transfer when a local gang ambushed their convoy, drawn by the bounty. Alex had fought his way out, taking the knife wound in the process, and now he was alone, lost in a foreign land with no backup and no plan. The forest floor crunched under his boots, branches snagging at his torn jacket. His burner phone, Victor's replacement, was long gone, smashed during the ambush. The satellite transmitter was still in his pocket, but its battery was dead, useless without a power source. His only hope was the message he'd sent to Tom Carver in Internal Affairs, the partial Vorya data in the accusation against Mullins. If Carver got it, if he acted on it, Alex might have a chance. But that was a big if, and time was running out. He heard it before he saw it, a low hum like a distant engine, growing louder. Headlights pierced the mist, sweeping through the trees. Alex dropped to the ground, his sides screaming as he pressed himself against a fallen log. An SUV roared past, its tires chewing through the dirt, Vorya's men shouting in Russian and Serbian. They were close, too close. He held his breath, the Makarov ready, but the vehicle didn't stop. Not yet. He waited until the lights faded, then forced himself to move, each step a battle against pain and exhaustion. The forest gave way to a narrow road, its asphalt cracked and overgrown. In the distance, a faint glow marked a village, his only shot at shelter, maybe a phone. He staggered forward, his vision blurring, the blood loss pulling him toward darkness. He couldn't stop. Stopping was death. The village was a cluster of stone houses, their roofs sagging under the weight of neglect. A single tavern glowed at the center, its sign unreadable in the Cyrillic script. Alex slipped into an alley, his back against a damp wall, his breath shallow. The gash in his side was deep, the pain a constant pulse that matched his heartbeat. He needed a doctor, but doctors asked questions, and questions led to Vorya. He checked the Makarov, 4 rounds left. Enough to make a stand, not enough to win one. He needed a plan, but his mind was sluggish, clouded by pain and memory. Emily's face flashed before him, unbidden. Her soft brown eyes, her smile, the way she'd looked at him before the trafficking ring took her. He'd been a rookie then, working Vice, too green to see the signs. She'd been investigating a story, digging into a local syndicate, and they'd made her pay. The case had broken him, turned Alex Rourke into a man who lived for the job, for justice, for revenge. And now here he was, neck deep in another ring, with Mullins' betrayal cutting deeper than any knife. A sound snapped him back, a low growl, tires on gravel, another SUV slowing as it entered the village. Alex ducked into the tavern, the door creaking as he slipped inside. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the sour tang of spilled beer. A handful of locals glanced at him, their eyes wary but uninterested. He slid into a corner booth, pulling his jacket tight to hide the blood. The bartender, an old man with a scarred face, approached. "Pivo?" he asked, his voice gruff. Alex nodded, sliding a few crumpled euros across the counter. The beer was warm, but he sipped it, using the moment to scan the room. No Vorya, not yet, but the bounty meant anyone could be a threat. His side throbbed, his vision swimming. He needed to stay conscious, needed to find a way out. The door banged open and 2 men entered, big leather jackets, tattoos peeking from their collars. Vorya's wolf's head, unmistakable. Alex's hand slid to the Makarov under the table, his finger brushing the trigger. The men spoke to the bartender, their voices low, their eyes sweeping the room. They hadn't seen him yet, but it was only a matter of time. He stood moving toward the back, his steps unsteady. A narrow hallway led to a rear exit, but as he reached it, a third man stepped out of the shadows, a pistol aimed at his chest. "Kane," the man said, his Serbian accent thick. "You're worth more dead." Alex didn't think, just acted. He lunged, tackling the man to the ground, the Makarov clattering across the floor. They grappled, Alex's wounds screaming as he drove a fist into the man's jaw. The gunman grunted, swinging back, his knuckles grazing Alex's temple. Pain exploded, but Alex held on, slamming the man's head against the wall until he went limp. Gunfire erupted from the tavern's main room, glass shattering, screams rising. Alex grabbed the Makarov, stumbling through the rear exit into an alley. He ran, his vision tunneling, blood dripping onto the cobblestones. The SUV's headlights flared behind him, its engine roaring. He dove into a side street, then another. The village a maze of stone and shadow. A bullet caught him in the leg, a searing pain that dropped him to his knees. He crawled behind a dumpster, his breath hitching, the Makarov shaking in his hand. 3 rounds left. The SUV stopped, doors slamming, voices shouting. He fired twice, hitting one man in the chest, the other in the shoulder. The third shot missed, and then they were on him, boots kicking, fists pounding. He fought back, but the world was fading, his body betraying him. He woke to pain, sharp and relentless, his body a map of bruises and blood. He was lying on a cot in a small room, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and wood smoke. A woman hovered over him, her hands gentle as she stitched the gash in his side. She was older, maybe 60, with gray hair tied back and eyes that carried a quiet grief. A man stood by the door, his face weathered, a shotgun cradled in his arms. "Where am I?" Alex croaked, his throat dry. "Safe," the woman said, her English halting but clear. "For now." He tried to sit up, but pain pinned him down. The woman pressed a hand to his shoulder. "Rest. You're hurt bad." "Who are you?" he asked, his voice weak. "Milena," she said. "This is Luka, my husband. We found you in the alley, bleeding, dying." Alex's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The ambush, the gunfire, the collapse. "Why help me?" Luka stepped forward, his eyes hard. "We know the men who hunt you, Vorya. They took our daughter Anna 2 years ago, sold her. We never saw her again." Alex's chest tightened, Emily's face flashing again. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Milena shook her head. "No sorry. You fight them. We see it in you." He didn't respond, his mind slipping. The pain was pulling him under, and with it came memories. Delirious, vivid, unstoppable. Emily, her notebook filled with names and dates, her voice urgent as she told him about the trafficking ring she was chasing. "They're bigger than you think, Alex," she'd said. "They're everywhere." He'd laughed it off, told her to stick to reporting, leave the police work to him. A week later, she was gone, her body found in a ditch, her notebook missing. The case had been buried, ruled a random crime, but Alex knew better. It was Vorya or something like it, and he'd spent years chasing their shadow. He blinked, the room swimming back into focus. Milena was still there, her hands steady as she bandaged his leg. "You dream," she said softly. "Bad things." "Yeah," Alex muttered. "Bad things." Luka handed him a glass of water, his grip on the shotgun never loosening. "They'll come again," he said. "Vorya doesn't stop." "I know," Alex said, forcing himself to sit up. Pain lanced through him, but he gritted his teeth. "I need a phone, a way to contact someone." Milena nodded, pulling a battered cell phone from a drawer. "No signal here. You must go to town, but not yet. You're too weak." Alex took the phone, his hands shaking. He needed to reach Carver, needed to know if the satellite transmission had worked. And Isabel, where was she? Her apology, her disappearance, her connection to Mullins. It all swirled in his mind, a storm he couldn't navigate. That night, fever took him, his body burning as he drifted in and out of consciousness. Emily's face haunted him, her voice whispering accusations. "You failed me, Alex. You let them take me." He saw the warehouse in Mexico, the women in cages, their eyes like hers, pleading, broken. He saw Mullins, her cold smile, her name on that ledger. And Isabel, always Isabel, a shadow he couldn't trust. By dawn, the fever broke, leaving him weak but alive. Milena and Luka fed him bread and soup, their faces etched with a grief he recognized too well. "You must go," Luka said, handing him a coat and a map. "Belgrade. Find a signal there." Alex nodded, his body screaming as he stood. "Thank you," he said, the words heavy, "for everything." Milena pressed a small cross into his hand, her eyes wet. "For Anna," she said, "and for you." He pocketed the cross, the weight of it grounding him. He stepped into the morning mist, the Makarov tucked into his waistband, 1 round left. Belgrade was 10 miles away, a city crawling with Vorya's eyes. 83 days left, and he was running out of places to hide. But Emily's memory, Milena's cross, and the faint hope of Carver's response drove him forward. Voria was hunting him, Mullins had betrayed him, and Isabel was a ghost. Yet somewhere in the fire of this mess was the truth, and Alex would find it or die trying. He deleted the message, his jaw tight. The cantina's noise faded as his mind raced. A bounty meant Voria suspected a leak, and he was the prime candidate. The ambush at the warehouse, the missing extraction team, it all pointed to someone feeding them intel. Isabel had vanished with the women and the USB drive, but was she running from Voria or setting him up? And Mullins, her silence was a scream now, louder than ever. He needed to move, but the cantina's door swung open and two men walked in. They weren't locals. Too clean, too sharp, their eyes scanning the room like predators. Voria's hunters or bounty chasers. Alex slid lower in the booth, pulling the poncho's hood over his face. His Beretta was under the table, safety off, his finger brushing the trigger. The men spoke to the bartender in low tones, their hands gesturing toward the back. Alex caught a glimpse of a tattoo on one man's wrist, a Voria mark, a stylized wolf's head. They were here for him. He weighed his options: fight, run, or hide. Fighting meant blood, and blood meant attention. Running was better, but not yet. He waited until the men moved toward the back, then slipped out of the booth, keeping to the shadows. The alley was his best shot. He pushed through the door, the night air hitting him like a slap. But as he turned, a figure stepped out from behind a stack of crates. A woman, her silhouette sharp against the neon glow. Isabel. "Kane," she said, her voice low, urgent. Her pistol was in her hand, not aimed but ready. "You're a hard man to find." Alex's grip tightened on his Beretta, but he didn't raise it. "Where the hell have you been, Vega?" "Saving those women," she said, stepping closer. Her face was drawn, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "They're safe for now, hidden in a church north of here. But you're not." "No shit," he said, glancing back at the cantina. "Bounty on my head. $500,000. You here to collect?" She snorted, a sound that was almost a laugh. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. I'm here because we're both fucked." He studied her, searching for the lie. Her eyes were steady, but there was something else. Fear, maybe, or desperation. "The USB drive," he said. "You still have it?" She nodded, patting her jacket. "Safe, but it's not enough. We need more. Zoran's inner circle, his accounts. Without it, we're just running." "We?" Alex raised an eyebrow. "Last I checked, you were gone, and I was dodging bullets." "I had to get them out," she said, her voice sharp. "You think I planned that ambush? Someone sold us out, Kane, and it wasn't me." He wanted to believe her, but trust was a blade that cut both ways. "Mullins," he said, testing her. "You mentioned her in Budapest. What's the connection?" Isabel's jaw tightened, and for a moment she looked away. "She's complicated. I've worked with her before. Not Voria, but other ops, and she's got her own agenda, always has. I don't know if she's dirty, but I know she's not clean." Alex's stomach twisted. It wasn't proof, but it was close. Mullins, his lifeline, his handler, tied to Voria through a shell company, and now Isabel. "Why tell me now?" he asked. "Because we're out of time," she said. "Voria's closing in. They know there's a traitor, and they think it's you. Maybe me too. We need to move. Together, or we're both dead." Before he could respond, the cantina door banged open, and the two Voria men stepped into the alley, their guns drawn. "Kane!" one shouted, his voice thick with an accent. "No running this time!" Alex dove behind the crates, pulling Isabel with him. Bullets tore into the wood, splinters flying. He returned fire, his Beretta barking, catching one man in the shoulder. The other ducked, shouting into a radio. Reinforcements were coming. "Go!" Alex hissed, shoving Isabel toward the alley's end. She ran, her footsteps silent, and he followed, firing over his shoulder. They rounded a corner, sprinting through the town's narrow streets, the neon lights blurring into streaks. A stolen pickup truck was their salvation, parked behind a gas station, its keys still in the ignition. Alex hot-wired it in seconds, the engine roaring to life. They peeled out, the desert swallowing the town behind them. Isabel clutched the USB drive, her knuckles white. "Where to?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. "North," Alex said, his eyes on the road. The border. We need to get that data to someone who can use it. She nodded, but her eyes were distant. You sent something, didn't you? Back there with that transmitter. He glanced at her, surprised. You saw? I see a lot, she said. Who was it? Internal Affairs, he admitted. Old contact, only one I trust. She didn't respond, just stared out the window. The silence was heavy, broken only by the truck's rumble. Alex's mind churned. Isabel's disappearance after the warehouse, her sudden return, her knowledge of Mullins. It all added up to something, but he couldn't see the shape of it. Was she running from Vorya or leading him into a trap? They drove for hours, the desert giving way to scrubland, then the faint lights of a border crossing. Alex pulled off the road, hiding the truck behind a cluster of boulders. We walk from here, he said. Too hot to drive across. Isabel nodded, slipping the USB drive into a hidden pocket in her jacket. If we get caught, they'll kill us both. Then we don't get caught, he said, checking his Beretta. 3 rounds left. Not enough, but it would have to do. They moved through the night, keeping low, the border fence looming like a steel scar. Alex's arm ached, his wounds seeping through the bandage, but he pushed through. The crossing was quiet, the guards distracted by a late-night card game. They slipped through a gap in the fence, the desert stretching endless on the other side. But as they reached the U.S. side, headlights flared, pinning them in a harsh white glow. An SUV blocked their path, and Victor stepped out, his switchblade glinting. You're predictable, Kane, he said, his voice cold. And Vega thought you were smarter. Alex raised his gun, but Isabel grabbed his arm. Don't, we can't win this. Victor laughed, stepping closer. Zoran wants you alive, for now. Drop the gun. Alex hesitated, his finger on the trigger. Isabel's eyes met his, a silent plea. He lowered the Beretta, letting it fall to the sand. Victor's men moved in, binding their hands, shoving them into the SUV. As they sped away, Alex caught Isabel's gaze again. She mouthed one word, sorry. The word hit like a bullet. Sorry for what? Or something worse. 84 days left, and Alex was out of answers, out of trust, out of time. The only thing he knew for sure was that Vorya's net was tightening, and he was the one caught in it. Chapter 9. The Mask Falls. The Chicago skyline loomed like a jagged scar against the dawn, its steel and glass reflecting the first light of a city that never slept. Alex Rourke, Marcus Kane, moved through the shadows of an industrial district, his body a map of pain, the festering bullet graze on his arm, the stitched knife wound in his side, the fresh bruise on his leg where a Serbian thug's bullet had clipped him. 82 days into his mission, and he was back where it started, but nothing felt the same. Vorya's bounty, $500,000 for his head, had followed him across continents, and the silence from Captain Donna Mullins was no longer a mystery, but a betrayal carved in stone. He'd crossed back into the U.S. 3 days ago, slipping through a border checkpoint with a stolen passport and a trucker's help, a man who'd asked no questions for a wad of Vorya's cash. The satellite transmission he'd sent to Tom Carver in Internal Affairs had yielded a single reply. Mullins under scrutiny. Lay low. Evidence received. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a lifeline. The partial Vorya transit logs, the mention of Global Transit Solutions, and Mullins' name tied to it had lit a fire under Carver. Alex just had to stay alive long enough to see it burn. The FBI's regional safe house was a nondescript warehouse in a forgotten corner of the city. Its exterior rusted and unassuming, its interior a fortress of steel doors and surveillance. Alex knew it well, too well. It was where Mullins had briefed him 90 days ago, her eyes cold and calculating as she laid out the plan to infiltrate Vorya. Now he was here to confront her, to rip the truth from her lips or die trying. His Makarov pistol, down to 1 round, was tucked into his waistband, a last resort. His real weapon was the truth, or what he could piece together from the fragments of Budapest, Mexico, and Serbia. He slipped through a side alley, his boots silent on the damp concrete. The safe house's perimeter was guarded, but the security was lax. 2 agents, distracted, smoking by a loading dock. Alex waited, his breath steady despite the pain pulsing through his body. He'd learned their patterns years ago, back when he trusted the badge. One guard wandered off to check a fence line. The other lit another cigarette. Alex moved a shadow in the dawn and slipped a lockpick into the side door's mechanism. 10 seconds later, he was inside. The warehouse was quiet, its halls lit by dim fluorescence. He moved fast, sticking to blind spots, avoiding cameras he knew by heart. Mullins' office was on the second floor, behind a steel door with a keypad. He didn't have the code, not anymore, but he had something better: desperation. He pried open a maintenance panel, rerouting wires with a pocket knife, a trick he'd learned in Vice. The door clicked open and he stepped inside. Mullins was there, alone, seated at a desk cluttered with files and a laptop. Her hair was pulled back, her face pale under the harsh light, but her eyes were sharp, unyielding. She didn't flinch as Alex entered, his Makarov drawn, its single bullet a promise he didn't want to keep. "Rourke," she said, her voice calm, like she'd been expecting him. "You look like hell." "Marcus Kane's dead," he said, his voice low, raw. "So's your operation. Talk, Dana. Why'd you sell me out?" She leaned back, her hands folded, no trace of fear. "Put the gun down, Alex. You're not going to shoot me." He stepped closer, the Makarov steady despite the tremor in his arm. "Global Transit Solutions. Your name's on their ledger. Vorya's money funneled through your accounts. No extraction in Mexico. A tracker in my phone. You're playing both sides, and I want to know why." Her lips twitched, a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've been busy. Carver, I assume. He always was a dog with a bone." "Answer the question," Alex snapped, his finger brushing the trigger. Mullins sighed, standing slowly, her hands raised. "All right, you want the truth? The operation was never about Vorya. Not entirely. Zoran's the target. He's too big, too connected. The FBI, Interpol, even the CIA, they've been after him for years. But he's untouchable, so we made a deal." "A deal?" Alex's stomach twisted, the pieces falling into place. "With who?" "With the devil," she said, her voice cold. "Vorya's a hydra, Alex. Cut off one head, another grows. But Zoran, he's the heart. Take him out and the whole thing collapses. The brass wanted him gone, no matter the cost. So we used Vorya's own people to get close. The shell company, the money, it was bait to keep them trusting us." "Us?" Alex's voice was a growl. "You mean you? You let those women in Mexico die. You let Ivan die in Serbia. You hung me out to dry." "Not die," she said, her eyes flashing. "Relocate. Control. Zoran's empire is worth billions, Alex. You think the FBI or anyone wants it gone? Number, they want it managed. I was supposed to take his place, run the network cleaner, quieter. Your job was to get me there." Alex's blood ran cold. The mission, the 90 days, the blood on his hands. It was all a lie, a chess game with him as the pawn. "You're no better than Zoran," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "You're worse." Mullins' face hardened. "You're naive, Alex. This is the world we live in. Justice is a fairy tale. You want to save those women? Fine. But you can't save everyone. I made a choice." Before he could respond, the door burst open, and Isabel Vega stepped in, her pistol raised. Not at Alex, but at Mullins. Her black leather jacket was scuffed, her face drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes burned with purpose. "She's right about one thing, Kane," Isabel said. "You can't save everyone, but you can stop her." Alex's grip on the Makarov tightened, his eyes flicking between the two women. "Vega, where the hell have you been?" "Working," she said, her voice steady. "Interpol, deep cover. My mission wasn't Vorya, it was Mullins." Alex's mind reeled. Interpol? Isabel, an international agent? The pieces snapped together, her disappearance, her knowledge of Mullins, her push to steal the data in Budapest. "You used me," he said, his voice low. "Not use," she said, her eyes meeting his. "Partnered. I needed someone inside Vorya, someone they wouldn't suspect. You were perfect." Mullins laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Oh, this is rich. Interpol's lapdog and the burned-out cop. You think you can take me down?" "I'm untouchable, Vega. The FBI knows. They'll bury you both. Isabel's pistol didn't waver. Not if I have the data. The USB drive from Budapest. It's with my handlers now. Your name, your accounts, your deals with Vorya. It's over, Dana. Alex's heart pounded. The drive, the women, the blood. It was all leading to this. You knew about her, he said to Isabel. In Budapest. Why didn't you tell me? I couldn't, she said, her voice softening. You were too deep, too exposed. If I'd told you, you'd have blown your cover. I had to let you play it out. Play it out? Alex's voice rose, anger boiling over. I killed for this. I crossed lines I can't uncross. And you let me think you were one of them. I am one of them, she said, her eyes hard. Or I was. Deep cover means living the lie, Kane. You know that. But I'm out now, and so are you. If you make it through this. Mullins moved, her hand darting toward her desk. Alex reacted on instinct, lunging forward, slamming her against the wall. Her laptop crashed to the floor, files scattering. Don't, he growled, the Makarov pressed to her temple. You won't shoot, she said, her voice steady despite the gun. You're not a killer, Alex. Not like me. He hesitated, his finger on the trigger. She was right. He wasn't a killer. Not like her, not like Zoran. But he was done being a pawn. You're wrong, he said, his voice cold. I'm whatever I need to be. Before he could decide, an alarm blared, red lights flashing through the warehouse. Footsteps pounded in the hall. FBI agents, or Vorya's men, or both. Isabel grabbed his arm. We need to go, now. Alex lowered the gun, shoving Mullins back into her chair. This isn't over, he said, his voice a promise. They ran, Isabel leading the way through a maze of corridors. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets chewing into the walls. The safe house was compromised. Someone had tipped off Vorya, or Mullins had called in her own backup. Either way, they were trapped. Isabel kicked open a fire exit, the dawn light blinding as they spilled onto a rooftop. A helicopter roared overhead, its spotlight pinning them. Down! Isabel shouted, pulling Alex behind a vent. Bullets sparked against the metal, the chopper's rotor wash drowning out everything. We're fucked, Alex said, his Makarov useless with one round left. Not yet, Isabel replied, pulling a flare gun from her jacket. She fired it into the sky, a red streak cutting through the dawn. Extraction, she said. My people. A second helicopter appeared, smaller, unmarked, its guns blazing at the first. The Vorya chopper veered, then crashed into the warehouse below, a fireball lighting up the morning. Isabel's chopper landed, its door open, a man in black tactical gear waving them in. They ran, Alex's wounds screaming, his vision blurring. He collapsed into the chopper, Isabel beside him. As they lifted off, he looked back at the burning warehouse. Mullins' silhouette still visible through the smoke. She'd admitted it. The operation was a sham, a power grab. And Isabel, Interpol, had her own game. Who are you, really? He asked, his voice weak. Isabel met his gaze, her face unreadable. Someone who wants Zoran gone. Same as you. The chopper banked, Chicago fading below. 82 days left, and the truth was a maze of masks, Mullins, Isabel, even himself. Alex clutched the cross Milena had given him, its weight grounding him. He wasn't done yet. Zoran was still out there, and so was the fight. But first, he needed to survive. Chapter 10, The Final Choice. The desert stretched endless under a blood-red sunset, its sands swallowing the ruins of an abandoned military base. Crumbling concrete bunkers and rusted barbed wire marked the place, a forgotten outpost in the Nevada wasteland, chosen for its isolation. Alex Rourke, Marcus Kane, crouched behind a shattered wall, his body a patchwork of pain, the festering graze on his arm, the stitched gash in his side, the bruise on his leg where a Serbian bullet had clipped him. His Makarov pistol, down to its last round, felt heavy in his hand, a final gamble in a game where the stakes were his life. 81 days into the mission, and it all came down to this. A showdown with Nikolai Zoran, the untouchable head of Vorya, and Captain Dana Mullins, the traitor who'd played him from the start. The Interpol helicopter had dropped him in Isabel Vega in Las Vegas 12 hours ago, its pilot silent, its destination a mystery until Isabel revealed the coordinates. "Zoran's here," she'd said, her voice flat, her eyes haunted. "Mullins too. They're meeting to settle the score." Her Interpol handlers had tracked Zoran's movements, pinpointing this base as the site of a final deal. A handover of Vorya's network or a betrayal to end all betrayals. Alex didn't trust her, not fully, not after her disappearance in Serbia, her apology, her revelation as an Interpol agent. But he had no choice. The USB drive's data, now with Interpol, had exposed Vorya's roots and Mullins' ties to Global Transit Solutions, but Zoran was the key. Take him down, and the empire fell, or so Isabel claimed. Alex checked his watch. 6:47 p.m. The air was thick with the smell of dust and diesel, the silence broken only by the distant howl of wind through the ruins. His stolen tactical vest, scavenged from a dead Vorya enforcer in Serbia, was heavy with spare clips. None for the Makarov, but enough for the Glock he'd taken from the helicopter. He'd traded his last round for a full magazine, a calculated risk. Isabel was somewhere in the base, scouting the perimeter, her silenced pistol and tranquilizer darts her weapons of choice. She'd promised to flank Zoran's men, but her absence now felt like another betrayal waiting to happen. He peered over the wall, his eyes scanning the central courtyard. A black SUV sat parked beside a crumbling hangar, its engine off, its windows dark. Two figures stood nearby. Zoran, his silver hair glinting like a blade under the fading light, and Mullins, her posture rigid, a briefcase at her feet. 4 Vorya enforcers flanked them, AKs slung low, their eyes sweeping the ruins. Alex's pulse quickened. This was it, the endgame. But where was Isabel? He moved, keeping low, his boots silent on the sand. The base was a maze of collapsed bunkers and rusted machinery, perfect for cover but deadly for traps. He'd seen Zoran's ruthlessness in Serbia, Mullins' treachery in Chicago. Both wanted him dead, but for different reasons. Zoran saw a traitor, Mullins a loose end. And Alex? He wanted answers, justice, maybe revenge. For Emily, for the women in Mexico, for himself. He reached a rusted fuel tank, its shadow deep enough to hide him. Zoran's voice carried across the courtyard, smooth and cold. "You promised me control, Dana. No leaks, no complications. Yet here we are, with Kane still breathing." Mullins' voice was sharp, unyielding. "Kane's not the problem. Your people screwed up. Mexico, Budapest, Serbia. You let him slip through?" Zoran laughed, a low rumble. "And you let him get too close. Your operation, your failure. The FBI won't protect you now." Alex's grip tightened on the Glock. Mullins had admitted it in Chicago. The operation was a front to eliminate Zoran and seize Vorya's network. But Zoran wasn't a fool. He'd played her, just as she'd played Alex. The briefcase at her feet, likely the last of Vorya's ledgers or payment for her betrayal, was the prize they both wanted. A shadow moved to his left, silent, deliberate. Isabel. She crouched beside him, her face pale, her pistol ready. 5 men total, she whispered. 2 in the hangar, 3 with Zoran. Mullins is armed. "You took your time," Alex muttered, his eyes on her. "Where were you?" "Doing my job," she said, her voice low. "Interpol's got eyes on this, but no extraction. We're on our own." He didn't trust her, but he needed her. "Plan?" "We hit hard, fast," she said. "I take the hangar, you take the courtyard. Zoran's mine." "No," Alex said, his voice firm. "He's ours. Mullins too." She hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but if it goes south, you run. I'll cover." He didn't respond. Running wasn't an option, not anymore. He checked the Glock, its weight steadying him. "On my signal." Before he could move, a shot rang out. A sniper's crack from the hangar roof. The bullet grazed his shoulder, a hot sting that sent him diving behind the tank. Isabel cursed, firing her silenced pistol, a dart hitting the sniper's neck. He slumped, his rifle clattering to the ground, but the shot had blown their cover. "Move!" Alex shouted, sprinting toward the courtyard. Gunfire erupted, Vorya's enforcers unloading their AKs. Bullets chewed into the sand, sparking off concrete, Alex returned fire, dropping one man with a clean shot to the chest. Isabel vanished into the hangar, her shadow a blur. Zoran and Mullins dove behind the SUV, their own weapons drawn. Alex slid behind a rusted Jeep, his shoulder bleeding, his breath ragged. The courtyard was a kill box, open and exposed, but he had no choice. He fired again, clipping another enforcer in the leg. The man screamed, collapsing, his AK skittering across the sand. "Give it up, Kane!" Mullins shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You're out of moves!" Alex's jaw tightened. He peeked out, firing at the SUV, shattering its windshield. Zoran returned fire, a pistol barking, the bullet whistling past Alex's head. He ducked, his mind racing. 2 enforcers down, 1 left, plus Zoran and Mullins. And Isabel, where the hell was she? A scream came from the hangar, followed by silence. Isabel emerged, blood on her jacket, her pistol still in hand. "Hangar's clear," she called, her voice steady. "Just them now." Alex nodded, moving to flank the SUV. The remaining enforcer charged, his AK blazing. Alex dove, rolling through the sand, and fired twice, both shots hitting the man's chest. He fell, blood pooling beneath him. Zoran and Mullins were cornered, but not helpless. Zoran stepped out, his pistol aimed at Alex, his silver hair gleaming like a beacon. "You're persistent, Kane," he said, his voice calm, almost amused. "But persistence doesn't win wars." Alex stood, his Glock steady, blood dripping from his shoulder. "This isn't a war, it's a reckoning." Mullins laughed, stepping beside Zoran, her own gun raised. "You still don't get it, Alex. There's no justice here, just power, and you're on the wrong side." Before Alex could respond, Isabel fired, her dart hitting Mullins' arm. She gasped, stumbling, her gun falling. "You bitch," she hissed, clawing at the dart before collapsing, unconscious. Zoran didn't flinch, his pistol still on Alex. "Impressive," he said, "but it changes nothing. You die, she dies. The data dies with you." Alex's finger tightened on the trigger, but Isabel moved faster, tackling Zoran. They hit the ground, grappling, her knife flashing as she aimed for his throat. Zoran was strong, his hands choking her, his pistol lost in the sand. Alex lunged, slamming the butt of his Glock into Zoran's temple. The man grunted, his grip loosening, but he wasn't done. He kicked Isabel off, rolling to his feet, a knife now in his hand. The 3 of them stood, a deadly triangle in the desert's fading light. Alex's Glock had 3 rounds left. Isabel's pistol was empty, her knife ready. Zoran's blade glinted, his eyes cold, calculating. "1 bullet," he said, his voice a taunt. "Who gets it, Kane?" Alex's mind raced. Mullins was down, but not dead. Isabel was an ally, maybe, but her Interpol agenda was a shadow he couldn't trust. And Zoran, the man who'd built an empire on blood, who'd known about Emily, who'd played them all, was the root of it, but killing him wouldn't end it. Mullins' betrayal, Vorya's network, the women still out there. It was bigger than one man. "Drop the knife," Alex said, his voice steady. "Or I drop you." Zoran smiled, a predator's grin. "You won't. You're not a killer. Not like me." He lunged, his knife arcing toward Alex's chest. Alex fired, the Glock barking, the bullet catching Zoran in the shoulder. He staggered but didn't fall, his knife slashing, grazing Alex's arm. Isabel moved, her own knife driving into Zoran's side. He roared, swinging at her, but she was faster, twisting the blade. Zoran collapsed, blood pooling in the sand, his eyes still defiant. Alex turned to Mullins, now stirring, her eyes wide with fear. "Alex," she whispered, her voice weak. "We can still—" He fired, the second bullet hitting her chest. She gasped, falling back, her eyes blank. 2 rounds gone, 1 left. He turned to Isabel, his Glock raised, his breath heavy. "Your turn," he said, his voice raw. "Who are you, Vega?" "Really?" She dropped her knife, her hands raised, blood dripping from her fingers. "I told you, Interpol. My mission was Mullins, then Zoran. It's done, Alex. You can walk away." "Walk away?" He laughed, a bitter sound. "There's no walking away from this." She stepped closer, her eyes steady. "There is. The data's with Interpol. Vorya's crumbling. You did that. Let it go." He hesitated, the Glock shaking in his hand. Emily's face flashed before him, her voice whispering, "You failed me." But he hadn't. Not this time. He lowered the gun, his last bullet unfired. "Go," he said, "before I change my mind." Isabel nodded, stepping back. "You're a good man, Alex. Don't forget that." She vanished into the desert, her silhouette swallowed by the dusk. Alex stood alone, the bodies of Zorn and Mullins at his feet, the base silent except for the wind. He dropped the Glock, its weight too much, and walked away, the sand erasing his footprints. 3 days later, a man stood at McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas, a new passport in his hand. His face was hidden behind dark sunglasses, his hair dyed black, his frame leaner than it had been. The name on the passport was unfamiliar, James Carter. But it didn't matter. Names were just masks, and he'd worn too many to count. He boarded a flight to nowhere, the cross from Milena still in his pocket, its weight a reminder of what he'd lost, what he'd fought for. Behind him, Vorya's empire was fracturing, Interpol's raids tearing it apart, Carver's investigation bearing Mullins' legacy. But the man who'd been Alex Rourke, Marcus Kane, and now James Carter didn't look back. The desert had taken his last bullet, his last fight, his last name. As the plane climbed, the city's lights faded below, and he closed his eyes. 81 days had ended in blood, but the truth, whatever it was, had set him free. Or as free as a man without a name could be.